So, hello and welcome everyone to the Knowledge Action Network's working group on social change, a working group that we very much oriented towards social change in relation to learning opportunities. And we have with us today Jennifer O'Brien. I'm very grateful to Ali who introduced us to Jen. She is a development geographer by training. She works, her research focuses on sustainable development, particularly among marginalized communities. And she's very interested in the intersection between innovative pedagogy and independent field-based research and applied learning. So she's been using the Education for Sustainable Development, let's say, aims or frameworks to inspire and equip learners to ethically address the challenges of sustainability, inequality, and social justice to affect positive change, exactly what we want to hear about this morning. So Jen, the floor is yours, and we're very happy to have you with us.
Thank you, Eileen, ever so much. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon or good evening, wherever you are in the world and whatever is most appropriate. As Marlene kindly introduced, my name is Jen. I am I'm a senior lecturer in geography within the University of Manchester. I am working at the moment with the University College of Interdisciplinary Learning, which I'll explain in the process of our discussion today. And as of last week, I am the University of Manchester's academic lead for sustainability with a particular focus around teaching, learning and students. So I have a mammoth and, the way I see it, very challenging, incredibly important role on my hands for the next couple of years. Because as I like to share with you today, I think students are an incredibly important and often undervalued power within teaching and learning, and a power that could be better harnessed to affect social change through our work. Now, when Ali and Marlene first asked me to talk with you today, they were at pains to say that this is an informal network, that there should be more of a discussion, and I've taken them at their word. So I hope you don't mind that I will take quite an informal approach today. Some of my slides perhaps could be a bit tidier. I apologise, but this is a huge piece of work in progress. I'm honoured. I really value the opportunity to talk with you today, to hear your thoughts, and also to offer an open hand for partnership. Everything that I do at the moment is about partnership. And if there's anything at all, particularly if you're listening to this recording and you're thinking, oh, that's interesting, or even thinking, she doesn't know what she's talking about. We've been doing this for years. I'd love to hear from you. My contacts, my email, and my Twitter, because of course, if it doesn't go on Twitter, it hasn't actually really happened. Please do feel free to get in touch, because I'd love to hear from you. With all of those caveats, and as I say, please forgive some slightly tatty slides in places, because this is a massive piece of work in progress. Let me start with the punchline, if I may. And one of my arguments is that our students, so at the University of Manchester, we have 40,000 students, and I see them as this force for positive change. They are future professionals, they are future policymakers, they are leaders, they are carers. They are our graduates that are going to go out in the world and affect change one way or another. And as an educator, I feel a real moral imperative, if you like, to deploy that force, empower, equip, aspire that force to affect change in a good way, in a positive way. I use a now very well recognised approach, that is Living Labs, within the University of Manchester and beyond, recognising the idea that our university is a potential site for experimentation. We have this incredible body of researchers, of teachers, educators in the broadest sense. We practice, particularly at the University of Manchester, social responsibility within our operations, within our procurement. We have this incredible space in which we can trial, we can experiment with different ideas. And I would argue that to that Living Lab thesis, which is now very, very well recognised, most universities, particularly in the UK, talk about how they have a living lab. But I would argue that missing from that discussion is the role and the potential of our students. And one of the things that I'm trying really hard to do is to encourage our students to recognise the power that they have, and all of our students to move beyond the self-selecting sample of greenies. And forgive me, I mean that term with affection. I mean it with I don't mean it to be at all derogatory. Ali and I are very fortunate to work with geographers University of Manchester students, Manchester is the site of the Industrial Revolution, we split the atom, we have a big suffragette movement. We tend to attract students that are more actively minded in way. That's not scientific research, perhaps I should verify that, but in my anecdotal experience, often these students know more about the current sustainability agendas than I do. Part of my remit, I think, is to move beyond those students. So they're a very, very valuable part of our teaching and learning, which I'll explain to you how I'm operating momentarily. But I'd like to move beyond the geographers, the earth scientists, and really think about how we can share these messages above and beyond that. And that's where I think the Sustainable Development Goals, as I'll explain to you, is actually a really useful tool to do that. So that's essentially the punchline for today, that co-constructing learning with students is a good thing. And if I may, I'd like to evidence that across the next, maybe sort of 15, 20 minutes, then we'll pause for a couple of questions. And then I've got a few other ideas I'd like to share with you around the assessment for this course. If I may, rather than going into huge levels of detail about the course, which is very complex, I'm going to use it as a lens to evidence this idea that co-constructing learning with students is a good thing. So facetiously, my intended learning outcomes, talking a little bit about what partnership is or might be within development and within pedagogy, telling you about our course, which is creating a sustainable world, but throughout that teasing out these ideas of potential benefits, but also challenges of working with students. And as I say, this is a work in progress, open offer of partnership if you might be interested. And likewise, if you're sat there thinking, oh, no, she's talking rubbish. Again, I'd love to hear from you. So where has this all come from? Now, I'm sure you are all familiar with the Sustainable Development Goals. So this blueprint for a better world by 2030, constructed by the United Nations, framed in 17 goals with 169 targets to illustrate that they have been achieved. And perhaps interestingly, they are supposed to be as applicable to Manchester as they are to Mozambique via Moscow. Every scale, every space, they are a framework. To my mind, I've spent many years in development, they do need to be taken with a pinch of salt. I think they are slightly over-celebrated as the answer to everything. But quite frankly, they're the best that we have at the moment. So with the caveats that they're not ideal, forgive me, I'm trying not to get on my soapbox of how they are very flawed, particularly where SDG 8 sits with SDG 13, for example, but that's another story. They are uniting us together in this potential framework to affect change. And they are everywhere. My daughter's nursery school talks about the Sustainable Development Goals at the moment, for example. So very well recognised, are rainbow colours that everybody knows. Within the SDGs, partnership is represented as not only this clear goal, but also as one of the ethos that are required to achieve sustainable development. So to add the triple bottom line of sustainability, of people, profit, and planet, are these two new Ps of peace, but also partnership, and a real recognition that to achieve the agenda of the SDGs, this 2030 goal, we need this solid global partnership. Interesting how COVID, if there are any potential silver linings to COVID, has begun to illustrate new partnerships. I think a couple of different examples where you could suggest that sustainability has shifted its approach slightly as we're all united in a desire for health. But again, that's for another seminar discussion. This is one of the reasons that I was interested in UCIL, the University College for Interdisciplinary Learning, which is a centre that we have at the University of Manchester, replicated at a number of other universities across the world now, that offers learning opportunities for students above and beyond their degree learning. They're sort of interesting courses. We have courses around mental health, cyberspace, crisis of nature. What I find truly fascinating about UCIL is because they are interdisciplinary courses and they are available to all students from across the university, we construct learning spaces with a genuinely interdisciplinary lens, which I found truly incredible. So you're talking to a seminar room of an anthropologist, a geologist, an engineer, a mathematician, and truly together, that interdisciplinary viewpoint enables us to think about old sustainability challenges with a new lens, a new insight. Now, I've been working in sustainable development for an awful long time now, and truly I have learned, as in one particular case, an engineer and a theologist had this really heated debate about what sustainability actually is. So phenomenal opportunities within this interdisciplinary space. Tying that together, the 1990s literature into the early 2000s perhaps, around students as partners is a very well recognised and quite cliched body of literature within pedagogy. So some of you may recognise this quite iconic, if you like, image that's been put out by the Higher Education Academy, which is kind of our pedagogic advisory board, if you like, within the UK. It's certainly the board that accredits our colleagues. You can get fellowships through the Higher Education Academy, that recognises why working in partnership with students is so great, and it helps around things like curriculum design, all sorts of literature that I could quote to you about how student-staff partnerships have improved employability, for example, development of skills and confidence, team working, which is Jarvis and et al.'s work of 2013. Hattie and Bovell have done a lot of work around how students that are involved in curriculum development get a better insight into how the university works. This has become even more acute in a pandemic when our student representatives fluently talk about the differences between faculty and schools and departments. I didn't know that until about the second year of my PhD as to how all the university sat together. Interesting argument perhaps in inequalities around how to engage with the university unless you are a student partner, but well recognised that students partnering with academics is a really good thing. All sorts of different quotes that I could share with you. There's two here. The idea it's a relationship in which everybody is involved, actively engages in and stands to gain from this partnership. It's a reciprocal, collaborative partnership where everyone can equally contribute. To my mind, and from a living lab perspective, what I would argue is missing from this very well recognised body of literature is the idea of any kind of agency, any power of students to act as agents of social change and to affect change within the real world, discussed in 3,000 words, but in a world beyond the academy, to utilise the skills that they're engaging or learning from their degree programme to go out and affect change. And also perhaps I'd argue missing from that discussion is the opportunities that students should or could have to feed back into the construction of their course, which is one of the big elements that we have really tried to deploy within our Creating a Sustainable World course, which I'll explain to you momentarily. So I'm trying to tie together these two lines of argument. Am I bringing everyone along at the same time? Does that make sense so far? Are there any immediate questions, sort of setting out the approach to these thoughts? Thank you, Stephen, very much. Yeah, lots of not the most complex of debates perhaps, but intriguing to my mind to tie together how we operationalize these ideas of working in partnership, particularly because now is quite an interesting stage, particularly in the UK and around some of our educational structures. So the Advanced HE and the QAA, the Quality Assurance Agency, I want to say, I have to double check that one, have just released their new framework for education for sustainable development. So this has been a couple of years in the construction. It did involve students in both their ideas of what ESD is or might be, and some of their examples of best practice. I'm sure many of you are familiar with this idea, the idea that ESD should be an integral element of quality education. It's a key enabler for sustainable development. Essentially, it challenges students. It should empower, inspire, and equip them to affect change. Within the philosophy is the idea that students or the individuals that are learning through ESD or Education for Sustainable Development, that they are responsible actors. They can resolve challenges, they should respect cultural diversity, and together contribute to a more sustainable world. And as I alluded to earlier, Manchester is a particularly interesting site for this sort of approach. The image in your bottom right-hand corner there is our students. At least two of them, I think possibly three, I'm very proud to say, are Ali and my geographers, who occupied one of our main university buildings in protest against our university's then investment in fossil fuels. A real site where our students go out and do things, engage with the world. But what's also been recognised is just how challenging it is to embed education for sustainable development within a university learning experience, broadly speaking. Now, this is literature dating back from 2015. These are not new arguments, all sorts of different ways in which we might do this. Whether it is about embedding ESD within particular courses, having specialist courses, thinking about specialist sites. My argument being that you have to tailor the education as far as possible to the students and to their learning needs. And this is one of the things that we tried to do. And if I can beg your indulgence for just another couple of moments while I explain the course, and then we will take some questions and discussions at that point. So we, and there's a number of us, Marlene and Ali were involved, and forgive me if anyone else is, and I can't see your image on Zoom at the moment. We created a course that recognises that sustainable development in particular needs an interdisciplinary lens. This would be my personal argument, that sustainable development moves beyond any individual disciplines. UCL offered this amazing opportunity to not only teach in an interdisciplinary way, but for our students who are interdisciplinary to learn and then feed into the construction of the course. Of course, it's very difficult. So we pulled together over 80 voices from policy, practice, and the front line of sustainable development, suggesting that for our students to understand sustainable development, we need to move beyond the academy, which again is really well recognized within the literature, but also it's really complex. There's a whole nother discussion about how we practically did this. And a really interesting experience when I sent out the same materials to an anthropologist and to an engineer and got back completely different interpretations, because cross-discipline borders use different languages, different epistemologies, different ontologies. So even the construction of the course required really careful thinking. Certainly our students, and forgive me, I would normally present with students, but they're a bit tied up with their coursework at the moment. So I'm going to bring their voice in through their written feedback. And this is one of the things that came up time and time again in our student feedback, that they really enjoyed the variety of voices involved within the module. And what we've tried to do is to use the Sustainable Development Goals as pedagogy, to move beyond the tick boxing, the rankings, the metrics, and really embrace the principles, or the ethos, if you like, of the SDGs. So recognizing, for example, that we're working in partnership and that we are respecting different knowledges. And in many cases, they were our students because we're working in an interdisciplinary space. So yes, we had Khalid Malik, who was the former head of the United Nations Development Programme, but we also had, forgive me, being a little bit controversial, but some really interesting voices, including Sarah Lago, who is one of our Equity and Merit Scholars. It's a programme that the university runs where gifted scholars from Rwanda, Tanzania, Ethiopia, and Uganda study the distance learning or on campus through support from the alumni. Sarah had many, many years of experience working in development in Uganda, and also her personal life as she'd grown up in the north of Uganda in conflict. But she had never actually constructed learning materials before. I worked with Sarah. We talked through what assessment is, how it would work, how we could work in an online accessible space. Together, years on, well, all of her years together, Sarah was recognised as one of Uganda's top 40 women under 40. And one of the things that she referenced was her teaching experience. Really exciting way in which our students got to hear Sarah's incredible insight, and it was beneficial to her. To my mind, this is an example of deploying a Living Labs approach to constructing our teaching, which then, and forgive me for sounding mercenary, but we are working in resource-constrained environments, is actually really quite efficient. So we can dovetail together our different agendas. So how this all came together, so from a theoretical base of education for sustainable development, we use the SDGs as a starter for conversation. So each of our modules is framed around one of the SDGs, and we have interdisciplinarity within those goals. If I may example this for you, SDG 6, clean water and sanitation, we try to give the students the opportunity to consider water in a very holistic way. So Perry talked a lot about the natural resource constraints of water access. Really fascinating to hear Shabana's ideas of how the youth have a better understanding of water than any of the policymakers, as they're so actively engaged with it. And then Professor Eric Swingerdoo, a colleague of Ali and myself, he goes into the most fantastic Marxist rants about the political ecology of water, and actually it's all a political construct. Really interesting opportunities for the students who, because they are coming at this learning from different interdisciplinary perspectives, can tease out the intersections across these ideas. What I found interesting is the SDGs then become a really intriguing vehicle, if you like, to talk about sustainability, because you can capture students' imaginations. I have this sort of this ongoing beef about the C words. And I think for most students, if you start talking about carbon, you start talking about climate crisis, they don't see that as either part of their responsibility or part of their learning space. Why I think the SDGs are really interesting is that the broad breadth of them, notwithstanding the critique of the SDGs from a development perspective, but the breadth offers something for everybody. So it might be that you can engage with someone around questions of gender equality, for example. You can attract people's imaginations around Industry 4.0 and technological solutions to challenges that we face, which then become a broader discussion about how this all fits into questions of sustainable development and sustainability. What became crucial within this, at least to my mind, was having that continuous dialogue between our learners and ourselves as we were constructing the course. And as I say, recognizing the superior knowledge in some cases of our students. One student got in touch with me to suggest that the way I'd framed some writing around dementia, and I was trying to say that older populations are naturally putting pressures onto the planet because we're living longer and therefore we have more challenges around natural aging conditions such as arthritis, etc. She was writing a dissertation around dementia. And so I said, okay, fine, rewrite the work for me. And overnight we changed the material on Blackboard, which is our virtual learning environment, because she was more expert than I was in this space. We give the students constant opportunities to feedback. So at the end of every module, yes, we ask them how it went, but also what they would add. So what we say is, so you are approaching, for example, SDG 3, good health and well-being, from the perspective of an engineer. What do you think is missing? How could your viewpoint enrich this module? Should we have more technological insights into, I don't know, how to distribute malaria tests, for example? Tell us. And what we then do is, one process that I'm doing at the moment is using that student voice to build future material for our students. This came through in online discussion boards as well, when we were saying to students, you know, what are the critiques of the SDGs? Would you rewrite your own SDGs? What would you leave in? What would you leave out? And students are really inspired by this. I was overwhelmed by some of the activities, the impact that our students had via the course. So one of our students has created the most incredible Instagram feed. I'm working with her at the moment to build a platform. We have a real focus on communication around sustainable development through our course. Students are writing this amazing work. Rather than leaving it sat in Blackboard, we're building this platform, which might become useful teaching material. And what Frankie is doing is using her incredible creative skills to make memes, online resources that link through and can really promote these ideas. One of our students went to Ghana to activate his assessment. What I really liked is he got there and he realized that his assessment was not at all grounded in the space, rewrote his approach, worked with local people. Got this really interesting construct about the idea of empowerment. Forgive me, I'll talk too long about this so I'm not careful, but really fascinating project. And then our Want Not Waste team took the course. We've got this really lovely link with them now where we talk about the Want Not Waste shop, which is on our university campus. It's a source of volunteers for the group. I've been helping them around some of their funding applications, for example. So this real living lab approach to pedagogy, which has enabled us to benefit from our integrated learning. Now, if I may, sorry, forgive me, we are about 25 minutes in. Maybe that's an apt moment to pause for a second and just take any questions or points of clarification. Forgive me, as I say, it's a very big piece of work and a complex cause, but so far, what I'm trying to suggest is that the interdisciplinarity that we have offers us a wealth of opportunity. And if you don't mind, maybe after this discussion, I will evidence how I think that's valuable for staff as well, or academics. Generally, I think the student voice could be stronger in teaching and learning. And that, as we've already shown, and we're in 2 years into the running of this course, that using the SDGs as partnering pedagogy can be quite powerful. That's where I'm up to at the moment. But if you had any thoughts or questions around those ideas so far, I'd really welcome them.
Great, thank you so much, Jen. So maybe just speak up or show a hand if you want to ask a question. Anna.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Jen. Really fascinating. It's so timely for me to hear you speak about this really important course, because I'm involved in a group looking to produce a report for the World Conference on Sustainable Education for UNESCO, actually, in the autumn. And the focus is specifically on the role of universities in achieving the SDGs. And it's really good to hear that you've emphasized the three kind of areas that we've also kind of honed in on in that report. One is around interdisciplinarity. And you rightly recognise things that we've identified as challenges around language, time, resources, also partnerships is another key area. And the third one was diverse knowledges. I guess I didn't hear as much about that in your presentation, although you did use that word, diverse knowledge, at some point, but I wondered in what context, because in the report, they're focusing mainly on Indigenous knowledges rather than sort of diverse academic knowledges. And I wondered how much that was incorporated into the course. So that's my first question. I have another one, just a quick one, if I may, afterwards, if you want to answer the first one.
Oh, it's a wonderful question, Anna. Thank you. Not enough at the moment would be my argument. One of the ways in which we've constructed the course is it should grow. This was an argument around the resilience and the sustainability of the course, and the idea that I'd like to see it as quite an organic beast, if you like, as it has been at times. The way that we structured it was to have a lead for each of the modules where we asked them to draw upon their thoughts, their networks, their ideas. We've reached across the university, certainly, and then across international research networks. There are some sort of classically diverse knowledges or voices coming through, but certainly not enough. And one of the efforts that we made towards forgive me, I always struggle to use the word decolonising the curriculum because I don't have enough time to explain where I'm coming from around that area. But one of the things we tried very hard to do was literally practice that ethos around respecting different knowledges, which was why it was so important to me to work with our equity and merit scholars, for example, who have a different background. They're very experienced. Some of them perhaps don't have an undergraduate degree, and this is an entry into an academic space. But it's potentially a weakness of the course at the moment. It's something that I'm working on at present, that we could increase different voices. It becomes horribly practical, and forgive me for sort of selling out on that, but one of the challenges that we have is things like credits. So we have to spend so much time per credits, and you run into this real challenge around interdisciplinarity of ensuring that everyone has the same level of understanding. So it might be that you need to bring everyone up to a base level knowledge of sustainability. So then you have to make these really challenging decisions around which is the most important information to share. And that's where we're looking, or I'm looking at the moment, of sort of advanced sections, or we're actually looking at a master's program at present. I'm really interested in taking this further around CPD or executive education, but that is a very practical limitation, to be honest, of fitting the big ideas within the pragmatics of university structures.
But I think that's something that's come through with other presentations that we've had to the group, which is around the spanning from the mundane to the sublime, kind of the range of challenges, which can be very ideological, theoretical, right through to the very practical. So that's really helpful. And just a small question then, you mentioned about the variety of voices as being considered to be positive in student feedback. You used a quote from that. So I wondered how you went about ensuring coherence with those diverse voices, because if you have lots of people coming in and doing their little piece, then that can seem very fragmented. So what did you do to create the kind of narrative, the red thread running through the course, as well as having those diverse voices?
We pitched it as a real strength from the beginning, to be honest. And I mean, you could critique my use of feedback because I've given you a one simple sample that supports my point here. And what I particularly liked is, so we do have a very robust set of feedback from this course. I'm very interested in student feedback around teaching, and obviously there's a very power-driven, particularly gender dynamic around student feedback, and we thought about how we might offer opportunities that would smooth over some of those challenges. What I really liked is that our feedback was quite polarized. As absolutely, as you say, for the student that said we really like the variety of voices, others said actually there was quite a lot of different voices coming in there, which I think, particularly when you were teaching an interdisciplinary way, or even you know what I mean, is a bit of a strength, because I think we should be challenging students. Interestingly, we had exactly the same polarized feedback over. One student said there's far too many videos. Literally the next piece of feedback said, we want more videos, there's far too much text. So one of my jobs now, we've got 2 years of feedback on this course, is to try and find a bit of a middle ground. But if I'm honest, from the very beginning, and there's a slightly awkward talking head of me at the very beginning that says, look, sustainable development or sustainability, it's a vast field, to tackle it together, and with this real ethos of we need you as the students. And I found this one of the most challenging things I found around the course was getting the pitch right and trying to find that balance of not to go to Extinction Rebellion, but to give students the truth in a way that wasn't completely paralyzing, respects their knowledge and their potential capacity. But also, and we do have a thread around eco-anxiety and sort of very practical suggestions of what students can do. Trying to find that balance was really complex, particularly when some students were coming to us because they self-admitted they're not actually that interested in sustainability or sustainable development, but they know that employers are looking for knowledge around the SDGs and they wanted it for their CV, which perhaps not my ideal motivation, but I can work with that actually. And if that's getting people in, enabling us to have this discussion, then I'm happy to go there. I hope that doesn't sound too sellout, but it represents my commitment to the cause. But no, we were very upfront from the very beginning, and we said there are a variety of voices. Also that the module is led from a particular perspective. So SDG 3, good health and well-being, is led by a GP. And it takes a very obvious medical approach because of that. I did a lot of writing through from some modules to get a bit more coherence, but we sold it, a bit neoliberal, isn't it? But we pitched it to students as one of the strengths. And with that said, if you think there are elements missing, or if you think there needs to be more global south or global north or different kind of case studies, let us know. And pitching it as a work in progress, a partnership together, I would argue is a bit of a strength. Sorry, it was a very long answer to an otherwise clear question. But
no, that's great. Really, really interesting. Thank you so much.
Great pleasure.
Any other questions from the group? If not, I actually have one. Oh, Katya, you go ahead. You go ahead.
You sure? Okay. Thank you, Jen. It was great. Super interesting. I have TA'd both with Marlene and with Martin on 2 courses related to sustainable development at the University of Geneva, and very interested and keen on learning about this big project that you're doing. I am coming from the position, I want to ask a difficult question about the roles and the different cultural implications of this framework. I originally come from Russia, and in my studies and in my academic work, I was living in Italy, for some time in France and Brussels, and in Belgium, also in the US and in the UK. And I have noticed that the relationship between the teacher and the student is different depending on the culture. So if the Anglo-Saxon system, in the Anglo-Saxon system, the teacher would respond to the student right away. It's very easy to reach the teacher. The relationship is more on the equal kind of basis. When you go to Italy to get an answer from your teacher or from a professor at the university, well, it takes a while because there are certain hierarchies involved. Similar things in France, I've noticed definitely similar things in Russia. So the relationship, the role of the teacher is more of a position of authority, which should not be questioned. And it's really very progressive professors who usually have done their studies themselves or exchanges with the Anglo-Saxon system, who promote this more conversations and exchanges. So having said that, I wonder how within this approach would you suggest to deal with these subtle hierarchies and positions of authority? And I feel that in some countries, teachers, if we speak about being in partnership with students, teachers may feel threatened by letting students engage into too much of a discussion, because then students often tend to maybe inflate their own role in the process. And where is this borderline between how far we should involve the feedback or consider the feedback of students, and what are the limits that teachers should not bypass. I don't know if I'm being clear. I'm just really trying to apply what you're talking about. Like, say I came back to Moscow and wanted to implement this in GIMO, and it would, like, I think the student would understand. It's not being done like that back there.
No, I understand the question, Katia. Thank you. And it's both a challenging one, perhaps. Oh, where to begin? I mean, this suggestion that I am making, I don't think it's even universal in the Anglo-Saxon system. I have many colleagues who take a very different approach to student feedback, and certainly wouldn't encourage feedback from students around knowledge areas. We have very staunch structures around feedback around pedagogy and teaching. And again, there's a discussion around a neoliberal education system there. Perhaps, I mean, to my mind, some of the work I've been doing at the moment to trying to encourage more people to adopt this approach, one of the benefits, or one of the ways I think it's helpful to share these ideas, is illustrating the benefits of working with students, in the sense that, I mean, students are writing this course for me going forward in a very pragmatic sense. The feedback that they're sharing is actually halving my workload, the material that they're producing. But I recognize that might be a challenge. One of the things I wonder, I don't know whether it might be an interesting start, but we used online discussion boards between students. And if it's a threat for students to be feeding back or engaging with colleagues, might there be space to do more where students are engaging with each other? And that's why I use an example. Let me just put in that bottom one there. And that was a really interesting opportunity for students from different disciplines to at least share and partner with each other. So if we have time after the questions, I just wanted to share with you one piece of assessment that we used, and which is applied research. And we got our students to work in interdisciplinary groups where they could share their insights with each other, their knowledges, their ideas, their methodologies. The students wrote the research individually, but they constructed their research proposals with help from each other. And I wonder whether that might be a way in which you could get students working in partnerships, sharing those ideas. I'm doing a piece of research at the moment, actually so we have SPI, Student Partner Intern, so it's being led by one of our undergraduate students, to look at these online discussion boards and to see whether they are particular spaces of empowerment. It was something I noticed quite anecdotally by teaching the same group of students face-to-face as well as online. This was pre-pandemic. And I noticed how much more confident and fluent they were on the online discussion boards than they were face-to-face in the seminar room. And these discussion boards flatten difference. We have a lot of international students. And I noticed that our international students were a bit more reticent to come and talk to me. I hope I'm quite an approachable person, but that's not necessarily part of their culture. Whereas on the online discussion boards, they were really confident. They flatten difference of age, of background, because they are asynchronous. Students could engage around their caring commitments, their work commitments, that sort of thing. If it's of interest, I'll share the findings once our student partner intern has finished collecting them. But I wonder whether that might be a space in which you could test out partnerships and working through, and then present ideas as to how it could be useful to academics. I don't know, what do you think?
Well, yeah, it's just, it kind of shows the framework a little bit. I was when I was listening to your presentation, maybe I misunderstood at some point, but my understanding was between the teacher and the students. So building partnerships and getting the feedback of students back into the course. So the teacher is taking the knowledge, the co-created knowledge back into the course, and then continues to change the course. But you're absolutely right that there is a lot of room for encouraging conversations among students, and then perhaps looking at them from a higher ground and not engaging in them, but then maybe taking some useful lessons and learnings back into the course with permission of students, of course.
I mean, we do both. I mean, absolutely. This course, the strength of this course is working in partnership with students who are helping construct it going forward. And maybe it speaks to the colleagues that helped to co-create it, that they were all on board with that idea. I'd like to think all the contributors I could count on as friends, people who are inspirational in their fields, perhaps a self-selecting sample of people who would be daft enough to do something this big and this risky at the time. Forgive me, I was wondering whether students working together might be almost like a toe in the water of this approach to begin with, almost like a safe way in which you could then think about how those ideas could begin to break down some of the power hierarchies within the broader academic structure.
Yeah, I mean, I think what Jen is also saying is that this type of program would have to be adapted to different cultural contexts, and yeah, but I guess it was sort of segues into what was going to be my question, which is how much institutional support did you have for all of this, Jen? I mean, do you feel that you're at a university where there's a strong culture around the SDGs and a strong commitment to sustainability? I would say that at the University of Geneva, despite the efforts that Martin has been engaged in and others, we don't really have a strong sustainability culture. Did you have a lot of institutional support to be able to make this happen?
I do now. It's a success. I didn't to begin with. And there was lots of navigating new waters, almost literally. This is an online course. It's pre-COVID. There were practicalities around online learning. We're looking at even, again, seemingly mundane discussions around workload. We were building a new workload model for online or distance learning. I had a lot of institutional support from UCIL, the University College of Interdisciplinary Learning, who recognized the potential. They had done research with our students around what our students wanted to learn as topics going forward within that centre, and sustainability came up. And I confess, very self-indulgently, I've always wanted to teach a course around sustainable development through the SDGs, so it's sort of an apt opportunity. And I'll be honest, it was a labour of love for me, as I say, very indulgent. I was interested in doing this. I have learned so much, and if there's time, I'll illustrate a little bit about how it's been advantageous to colleagues involved in this as well. We are about to go into our third year of running when the programme has expanded. Perhaps illustrating the students' interest, our numbers have doubled over the years. So we taught 400 students this semester around these ideas. And the university has invested in us to produce a postgraduate taught version next year, which is actually being seen as the pilot for online interdisciplinary postgraduate learning. I say that with some slight hesitation because we seem to be the pilot for lots of things at the moment, so I have to be quite careful of how much we commit to. I think one of the things I do have to say is that there has been a sea-level shift in institutional support for sustainability in the last couple of years. If I'd approached this maybe 5-6 years ago, it would have been a non-starter. But now, particularly because it marries different priorities. So online learning has been a key one. We're still teaching online in a pandemic. We've not been able to do any face-to-face teaching in Manchester because of our R8. Learning about student engagement, thinking about flexible and blended learning. So I think this course brings together a number of different priorities. So yeah, there was institutional support. Probably some more practical resource would have been useful over the time, because it took a lot of time. And it's one point I can't stress enough, online learning takes time. And that's perhaps one of the things we didn't factor in enough.
It really does. Yeah, it really does. But so it's an online course, just so I understand the technicalities. Yeah. It reaches, you said 400 students a year? That's massive.
So students choose, it's an elective.
Elective.
So this is where the centre is. So we have, sorry, how much detail is irrelevant here. Some of our students have what we call free choice options in their programmes, where they can take modules from either within their courses or beyond. That's why it's interesting in the sense that our students opted to take this programme. So they've made a bit of a commitment in that process. What was a clear strength was that our numbers literally doubled from our first year when we had around 200 students. In the second year, we had over 400 across different courses. There's a 10 credit version, a 20 credit, and there's an advanced version as well. But yes, so these were students who were clearly interested. And then the other thing that was quite fascinating this year was that we had genuine interdisciplinarity. So I could trace where students had come from, and they came from every faculty of our university, lots of different diverse subjects coming together, which I think is a really exciting opportunity. And as I say, I can't stress enough how intriguing it was when we had these different disciplines discussing the same question together. I've truly learned, and I think that is a real strength that we have going forward.
Great, thank you so much. Did anyone else have a question at this stage, or should we keep going with the presentation? Martin, go ahead.
Hi, Jen. Thanks very much for an interesting, fascinating talk. Yeah, I was sorry, I was missing the first 5 minutes of your presentation. So is this an independent bachelor program, or is this part of other bachelor programs? Because you just mentioned now 10 to 20 credits, and that threw me off because I was under the assumption that it was a single 3 or 6 credit course. So how do students marry this online course with their other traditional courses?
Okay, forgive me, we're at odds with our credit system. Essentially, it is a unit or a course that students can take as part of their degree program. So we work, at undergraduate level, we work in blocks of 10 or 20 credits. Broadly speaking, there is some cultural variation. It's generally 15 at postgraduate. But the idea is that this is, if you like, a 12-week course that students could slot into their degree program. Does that, yeah? And that, yeah. I'll stop there.
And Marlene, if I may, just one follow-up question.
Sure.
In your introduction, you mentioned the ambition of trying to reach beyond, I think you called them greenies, I call them tree huggers, but I think it's the same population, roughly speaking. And here at the University of Geneva, where the setup is fairly similar, it's an optional course open to any student of any faculty. We noticed that some faculties, particularly those that we might be interested in reaching out to, those that are not traditionally as interested in sustainability, might not have credits available for optional courses. And we see that there's a really strong bias towards those faculties that do allow their students to take an optional course, and then we're flooded by them. And conversely, other faculties that, the law students, some of the science students don't have options, and then they don't come. So how have you gone about, do you have to convince each individual faculty program to make this course one of the options available to the students, or how have you gone about that?
Yeah, I feel like I've sold my soul many times over the last part of it is that, and part of it, so there's a lot of research that's been done that nationally, and I've done a lot of research within our student body as well, where I can pretty much sell to program leads that our students want a knowledge around sustainable development, as well as pitching how important it is as future professionals that they go out and change the world and basically fix the mess of the generations before us. I've also approached it in different ways. Sometimes there are real practical challenges. Many of the courses across the university are professionally accredited, and they then have to teach to an external set of expectations, which is also around sustainability too. And that's a very common response that I get of, oh, we already teach sustainability. Engineers have sustainability built into their curriculum, which is recognized by their external quality assurance body. At which point I say, okay, fine, I'm not trying to replicate this. That would be ironically unsustainable. A very pragmatic challenge for us, I don't know if it's relevant to share with you, is how we do the load transfer for these courses, how it's funded, and that becomes a challenge. So essentially, as students cross faculties, the funds have to follow them. We have to be resourced around that, and that has been a limitation. I've talked to colleagues who go, well, we cover sustainability, so essentially, crudely paraphrasing a conversation, why should we pay you to do it? Particularly as you're only a geographer, you're not an engineer. Why should we trust your knowledge? One of the things that we have done that has been really quite successful is thought about other ways in which we could share these messages. So we piloted taster units for USIL, which was partly for students to get an idea of how it's taught, but I quite like them because it gave me a vehicle to share some of the key messages. It's not credit rated, it takes all of 40 minutes for the students to work through. We used it at welcome and induction. And I've also thought of the key points where these messages are shared. So we called it WIT this year, welcome, induction, translation, fresh as a week as I knew it back in the day. But students have the opportunity to undertake interesting things, decision-making exercises, to engage with practical challenges, again, dovetailing with our different sectors across the university, volunteering, ethical grand challenges, that sort of thing. So I've thought in quite a lot of detail about how we can repurpose some of this material into non-credit rating. You don't have to sit and engage with it for 12 weeks, but here's almost like a capsule or a pocket version that you might be interested in. We have another platform which used to be called 10,000 Actions. It's going to be Manchester Actions as of next year, which sort of gamifies sustainability, where it's a bit of a competition where you can rank your involvement, how many times you cycle to work, how many research sessions you've been to that relate to sustainability, that sort of thing. And we've included within that a capsule version of this course. So if students or staff sit and listen to these ideas for about 40 minutes, they can include that as one of their tallies, if you like, for 10,000 actions. So I've tried to take a very holistic, multi-pronged approach to how we can embed it. The postgraduate taught version is a bit more challenging because there's a lot more resting on it. And students generally have fewer free choice options. So that course will run from September. And at this point in time, I have absolutely no idea how many students we will recruit. And I think there's a real difference when you're talking to people who are talking to postgraduate taught directors who go, oh yeah, that's brilliant. And then how that actually translates when they're talking to their students and they say, you know, go and do this course. So yeah, lots of thinking about how we can approach from different angles.
Great. We have about 5-10 minutes left. So I don't know whether, Jen, you want to, if you have a few more slides you wanted to share with us. If others have burning questions, they can also ask.
May I share one thing with you? Literally a couple of moments as part of this course that we have been working on that I would absolutely love to share with you if it might be useful. One of the ways in which we assess our students on this course is through applied research. And again, this draws upon, and forgive me, I will condense this all down in the last couple of minutes, but it draws upon the living lab approach and the idea that our students should go out and affect change. Why, if they're going to be assessed, should they write yet another essay that sits on a shelf or sits in a virtual learning environment and gathers dust? Why not do something useful? Now, I started this about 5 years ago. It's been used on various courses since then with great success. And it's the idea that we have this 40,000 strong force for change. External organizations often need an insight into problems, challenges, ideas around sustainable development. And what we're trying to do is broker the two together. So I have about 150 projects at the moment from external organizations. This is real research that they need. And what we've done this year is built an online platform. It goes live in about 2 weeks' time that shares both the projects and the students' work. And we did a little bit of a calculation. And we worked out that in the UK alone, students that are studying in and around sustainable development have at their capacity about 7.5 million hours of study time that could be invested into applied research for sustainable development. So we've created this platform. It looks like this. We piloted it with our students, as I say, in different courses, and the students love it. They love the idea that they're doing real research set by external organizations. We've had a number of organizations use this work. So a lot of our Manchester City Council asked for a critique from the students of their carbon 2038 policy, which they're using in the second iteration of their policy output. We've had students employed by the organizations that they did their research for. And I'd like to grow this model. It's proven locally within the UK. We've already got a slight global angle due to the number of external and international partners involved on our course. Basically, external partners pitch a very broad overview of the kind of research that they need, and our students can apply those broad brush briefs to any assessment level, largely any discipline. We frame these research proposals around the Sustainable Development Goals, and there's lots of opportunity there. As I say, building this platform has been an absolute labour of love. We can showcase the students' work, which then generates an open resource of information. It's a great opportunity for the students around employability. The platform took a lot of work, and if it might be of use to anybody to either use our research program, our research project so far, or to contribute to them, I would be delighted to work with you. To give you a little bit of an insight into how well this has been supported, Our students love it. Regularly, they quote the applied research as being the reason why they got a job, or indeed are working for the organisation they did their applied research for. We have organisations ranging from the council through to small charities or NGOs, perhaps people who couldn't afford consultancy or would like some seed corn insight before they pay for it. Excuse me. And it's really fantastic, I think, that smaller organisations can work with our students and benefit from that insight. But also it's beginning to grow. I'm very fortunate to work with Mark, who's based at the City Council. We're looking at how we can build the University Living Lab structure together and how it's reframed a lot of their thought. This obviously extends beyond teaching and learning. A number of our REF impact cases are based around a Living Lab approach at the moment. But as I say, I think the student niche within that is particularly interesting. So if it is of use to anybody, if you could either use the current projects that we have, or you'd like to work together to grow them, it's really quite a fascinating model. And as I say, we're hoping to go live in a couple of weeks' time with our new platform. What's been really interesting from this approach is how colleagues have reframed some of their thinking. And a number of our colleagues were generous enough to say that their thoughts around their teaching and their research has actually shifted their approach. So Professor Michael Shaver, I think he had a 1-point-something million pound bid. He was generous enough to say that he'd always taken a very technological engineering approach to plastics, to polymers, and actually working with colleagues in and around this course. And actually some of the things that our students had said made him reframe some of his ideas. Dr. Sarah Hall, a very amazing colleague, also spoke about how she reframed some of her work around the Sustainable Development Goals, which led to a very successful research bid. Some of our GTAs have gone on to teach in different spaces. I guess different ways to evidence how working in partnership can be useful.
That's great, Jen.
Maybe I'll end there. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this platform. I'd love to use something similar for an applied research workshop we do here in the spring. Just a quick question, and I'll see if anyone else has questions as well. The people proposing the research projects are staff members, or you also work with external partners, or how did the research projects come about?
They are mainly external partners. And as I say, everything from NGOs through to council, policymakers, largely external. We have a few internal projects as well, where I've gone to our sectors, groups like widening participation, groups such as social responsibility, for example. We do have internal applied study modules where staff are pitching research projects. It's possible potential for growth. My sense was that was generally happening at a local level anyway. And what I quite liked about this opportunity was it was brokering our external partners with us, with obvious benefits around our internationalization and business agenda, that sort of thing. But I think students' imaginations are particularly captured by it because it's real, because it's not an academic suggesting a research project.
Sure. Who's managing the relationship? Is that you, or is there a team in place? Because it's quite a lot of work, the outreach to get these partners on board. And then what is the time commitment of the partners? Do they have to meet with the students 1 or 2 times or give feedback?
It's very light touch and it's very organic. It's certainly the model that we have tried so far. And the idea is the partners suggest a very broad brush overview of the research that they need. And it can be applied, it can be focused down, it can be developed, it can be narrowed. What we've found is where partners have a very specific need for research, they're more keen to get involved, and they will ask, for example, to see a proposal, they'll want to talk to the students. We can't offer that through the platform, generally speaking. It's more an idea of here is some research. Sorry, apologies, I'm struggling to keep on top of the chat as well. I will come to it in a second, but more of sort of how students can tailor the research. One of the things that we recommend, and there's all sorts of, there will be all sorts of supporting resources on the platform, are giving students opportunities to, for example, do a research proposal. So we would talk about how you could operationalize this within your teaching. It's more of a platform to broker the opportunities and to share the work rather than a teaching space. So there's some rudimentary materials around ethics. We link through to resources around methods, but it's more, here's an idea, could you make it work? And the ideas, therefore, are kind of more long-term strategy stuff. I get a lot of external organizations saying, please can someone analyze this data for next week? And actually, no, I can't do that. But if they say, you know, broader ideas around public's opinions around clean air zones, that sort of thing, we can pick up.
Yeah, it's really exciting, this platform, and Stephen McGreevy, who had to leave, said something similar. Karen also has to jump out. So I think we're wrapping up now. But I just want to say, Jen, you have, you know, a group of people here that are very interested in this platform, and maybe once it's, you know, public and accessible, if you could share it with us, that would be really great.
With huge pleasure, truly, honestly, I would love, this has been years of blood, sweat and tears, and it would be a complete delight if it could be useful to anybody. And likewise, if it's something that you're interested in as a concept and you'd be interested in us working together of how we could develop it, I'd also love to hear your ideas.
I'm keen on that. And maybe we need to have a follow-up discussion around this within this working group. So if you can give us a sense of when you're launching it, or when, you know, because it would be useful if some of us could, you know, have a look, and then maybe we can have a specific brainstorm. I mean, that's what I see this working group as being about, you know, really us coming together and sharing where we're going with our work and trying to build on something collectively. So I would say, you know, we can even organize a session around this, Jen. There seems to be a lot of interest just on the platform.
I mean, that would be wonderful. That would be this, as I say, it's been tried. It's not a new concept. It's been tried by colleagues on different courses, and I can bring you all the feedback to support that. I'm not for a second trying to claim it or anything like that. You know, the whole idea is working in partnership for the benefit of sustainable development. So yeah, I'd be delighted. I
see Ali has a hand up, and I know Ali also.
Yeah, I was just
in about 10 minutes.
I was just going to say thank you, Jen. But also that's idea of kind of collaborating across institutions seems very interesting. For example, and there's probably opportunities to get, if there is commitment to that. Like Manchester has, for example, humanities strategic investment funds, where it's about setting up networks around certain activities, and often those networks are framed as research focused activities. But I imagine that there would be, given Brexit and the importance of us creating, maintaining and expanding our European networks, and given that many people on the call are from European institutions, I imagine that there would be, you know, a very strong support for this kind of activity. So, and to get some funding to help develop that, and that would be something I'd be keen to support too. We've unfortunately missed the rounds for this academic year, but I think that they come out fairly regularly. So
that'd be wonderful. I mean, thank you, Ali. That'd be fantastic. The platform is okay at the moment. I'm intrigued to see how it works. Is to start small and get feedback and see how it goes. But it's been used on so many courses so far that I'm convinced there's a real benefit in this longer term. So yeah, I'd be delighted to talk and work together going forward. Thank you.
Great. So maybe a next step is, Jen, you let us know when, I mean, the platform for me is like kind of the showcase. What's going to be interesting if we come together to discuss is everything that happens, you know, behind the scenes in terms of building partnerships and managing expectations, and, you know, then maybe, you know, evaluating the work and this kind of stuff. So we could have a focus on this if you like. You just let us know when it's suitable for you. And another nice thing about this group is nothing needs to happen fast. This can happen in September, you know, it's perfectly fine. October, November is looking open to me. So, you know, we're in the long term here. So you can, you know, suggest the timing that works, and we can bring a group together.
Amazing. That would be fantastic. Thank you so much.
Yeah, we all have, you know, much to learn from all of this. Do other people have questions? I know that people had to leave at 11:30. Martin?
Yeah, like thanks again for these extra slides. I think the Living Lab has piqued my curiosity and those of others, and I certainly share your instinct that students can get much more motivated, and it can be an interesting way of reaching beyond the academics. One of the questions I wanted to ask you, though, is there a certain risk when allowing outside partners to pitch projects that what I would call some of the priority actions for sustainability, especially coming from a Western country, get lost. Like I feel Switzerland, again, to speak very crudely and shortly, live well beyond our means in terms of impact, both socially and environmentally. And I try not to ever lose sight of some of those key messages as a Swiss citizen, what are we doing to get back within whatever the sustainable living space, whether you call it a donut or an SDG. And I feel like if we have outside partners, all of a sudden we're talking about, oh, should we use paper or plastic? And I feel like we sometimes get lost in the minutia and we lose perspective of the larger objective. So how do you strike that balance between those two things?
You've pretty much summed up the course, to be honest, Martin, and that's one of the things we encourage the students to unpack and consider their own social positioning within the world, and exactly that there are very challenging trade-offs and synergies around sustainability. In a very more draconian way, ultimately I decide what goes on the platform or not, or we would collectively decide. There are some that can be framed differently. It's interesting, we've had projects that are perhaps not obviously fitting with sustainability angles, and the organisation explains why. There was one around low traffic neighbourhoods that have actually been very, very political, very problematic, because they're long story short, they are channeling traffic down to boundary roads in which many people actually live. And we were able to frame that. We were able to problematize this and say, have you thought from this perspective? And for what it's worth, I quite like the controversial projects that make students think about different scales of competing influence and ideas. Often truly fascinating when they come at them from an interdisciplinary perspective as well. And again, genuinely, that's where the diverse knowledge is coming into play, where some students are much more expert and will turn around and go, actually, I've got X many years of engineering experience, that's not going to work, and I'm going to tell you how. And it's all safe in this concept of living labs, which is experimental, it's trialing, it's running with an idea. And we have had students that have taken a project and said, Sam said to the City Council, carbon zero 2038 is complete rubbish, it's not going to work. Difficult for the organisation to swallow to begin with, but also potentially a useful learning experience, maybe.
Yeah, great. And I think it's a matter of getting projects at the right scale, like you were saying also, Jen. It's not just about students executing work, but about, problematizing things, maybe applying conceptual frameworks for understanding things in different ways, maybe experimenting. Yeah, so great. Time is flying by. I don't know, are there other questions or?
I'm so sorry, forgive me. I'm going to have to get to my next meeting. Yeah. Actually, I do apologize, particularly as it's been such a generous and interesting discussion.
We're so grateful. We're so grateful for your time. I want to thank everyone for being here, and we'll definitely be following up with you, Jen, on the website. Everyone's quite keen to learn more about the platform. So really a warm thank you from all of us. Thanks to all who could attend.
Thank you so much.
It's been a great pleasure. Thank you so much for hosting me. Thank you.
Thanks, Jen. Great stuff you're doing. Bye, everyone.
Take care.
Bye.
Sorry, I'm still sharing the screen.